Hey, hi. Welcome back, everybody. This session is about marketing, electronics. With me is Sander Aerts, former CMO of both Atmel and XP. He's a seasoned board executive, and I would love to let him introduce himself. Sander, welcome to the Things Virtual Conference.
Hi, Winke. Yeah, thank you. I'm honored that you and I are in this session. I brought some orange tulips for you, so that from this Dutch household to you.
That's very good. That's very good. Nice.
Like a news anchor. So yeah, I'm thrilled to be able to be in this session. So I was, to your question about introduction, right? So I was head of marketing for NXP Semiconductors for 12 and a half years. Then moved to Silicon Valley already, where I became the head of marketing for a company called Atmel, which most people know because Atmel is at the heart of the Adruino with their AVR microcontrollers. It's on the most popular board, the Adruino Uno. We built a very significant marketing presence through and the embedded world, but also leveraging the Adruino network. And then in 2012, as everybody knows, Microchip picked up Atmel in a big acquisition. And then I decided to go at it all by myself. So I founded a business called Orange Tulip. Decided to write a book, which you and I talked about in Amsterdam when I was one of your keynotes at your conference. Face-to-face is always better, Winke, but still, I mean, this is pretty good. And in that capacity, I'm currently helping a variety of companies, including Adruino, which is interesting, right? Bare Conductive, Supply Frame. I did some work for Marvell. There are some AI companies called Grok, a very famous up-and-coming AI company. But also companies like Sci5, which is the RISC-V, the commercialization of the RISC-V architecture, and a few others. Supply Frame being one of them, which is very interesting. So yeah, here I am, and I'm very excited to be in this chat with you.
Great, you sound like a busy man with all these advisor positions. So thanks for taking the time with us. So like when we talk about marketing, I think marketing is also about, if you market and make the market, it's about changing paradigms. And I think along our conversations, you have shown that you've changed people's minds or changed the minds of entire boards of billion-dollar companies. And so maybe can you dive a little bit into the story around what you did with Atmel and Adruino, and how were you able to convince a very traditional company to embrace that and to really like implement or sell the paradigm shift to a very traditional silicon driven board?
Yeah. Well, that's a broad question right there. So there's a few dynamics in these boardrooms, right? First and foremost, it's mainly driven by engineers, right? So all of a sudden there's like this Dutch guy who's very direct and sometimes a little blunt, a non-engineer, which is difficult for people because you immediately come in a little bit lower in the food chain, so to speak, right? Because I don't speak necessarily the language of these engineers. And then, of course, marketing is relatively traditional in these businesses where people have the tendency to market on speeds and feeds, right? So I'm faster than my competition, I'm smaller than my competition, et cetera, which isn't necessarily always where the battle needs to be fought. So you have to be respectful for all of the things that are going on into these businesses because they didn't become multi-billion-dollar businesses for nothing. But there's always an additional stream of thinking that you can insert into these businesses, and I have a whole bunch of examples. The Atmel one is a little bit sort of easier to understand for people because it turns out that we were sort of by accident at the heart of the maker movement, but also professional maker movement through the Adruino connection, which was a gift from God kind of thing for the business because it helped us to be able to tap into the creativity and the entrepreneurial spirit of the people that were using our products, and we could tell all those stories, right? And which is something that most semiconductor companies aren't necessarily doing. And through pounding on that narrative over and over again and explaining to the world that we were enabling new things, right, mainly by just celebrating the use of technology, right, first and foremost, because nobody really wants to get like marketed to. We were able to really significantly change the face of the business. And there's other examples. Funny enough, now you see a lot of AI companies enter the market. And initially, the value proposition of AI companies is, hey, but we build an entirely new chip architecture, and it delivers a product that has 10x the performance increase from competition, which initially is great. But now I see more and more of those people enter the market, and it starts to remind me a little bit of the microcontroller days, where everybody is fast for the next 3 months, and then you're being beaten by your competition again. So from a marketing point of view, what do you have to do to be able to stand out from the crowds, but also to build the brand equity that you deserve or that you can be building? And I don't think it's over the axis of low power, high performance, small footprint. I don't think so, but it still happens.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, I think if I try to explain as well, is that they're all fighting in a red ocean, and which is then like in the end, like everybody loses, and what you have to do is to find the blue ocean and find something that is that is.
Totally right. It's a big race to the bottom that doesn't necessarily end anywhere, and then before you know it, you're being held hostage by a customer that has 2 or 3 of the same value propositions on their desk, and now you're at the mercy of your customer, right? So how do you market yourself out of it? Now, in your and my world, IoT plays a big role, and you see an increasing amount of people trying to market themselves out of the race to the bottom, right? So there's a few companies. I actually recently started helping a company called Sentient, and Sentient is like a voice AI business. They're in Irvine, here in Southern California, and it's so the essential value, the initial value proposition is you can add voice to anything you want. Right now, you can talk to your IoT device or anything else because it's super easy to implement. The question is, what does it enable, right? And these businesses with young fresh management teams are all intrigued by the potential businesses that they're enabling, if I'm still making any sense, right? So you're opening up a whole data play. Bear Conductive is another example in the UK, which essentially is a paintable IoT solution where we are unlocking a variety of new businesses for big materials companies, for example, in the world, where these material companies all of a sudden realize that they can create a whole bunch of additional value over and beyond their traditional selling of materials, right? Fall detection on floors, or earthquake detection in the building materials, smart home, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I think what these companies have in common is they are building a platform or a foundation which has a lot of value creation higher up in the value chain. And I think going back to that, like if you're in electronics, and I think we can say that IoT is still in a very immature market, because the challenge always is you're selling here. And for instance, for us as well, we're a technology company. We're selling here, but we have to market higher up the value chain because we have to create the market pool. So and it's interesting to say that at Atmel, like Adruino did it for you, and you found out later, right? Because they created the pool.
Totally.
And so with that experience and what you see there, and what do you advise? Like if you would now be like a CMO, or you would be at the board of, let's say, ST, Microchip, NXP. So what would you then now, like what would your plan be now, right? Like what would you do different to get out of that red ocean strategy?
Yeah, well, I remember a story where the statistics were different. But let's take today's statistics, right? So there's like IoT business is predicted to be like 10, 11 trillion by 2025. 35% of that, let's say 1/3, right, of that is going to be hardware. That means there's 2/3 of something else that probably doesn't exist today, which, as you and I know, is like data and data analysis and business models around the fact that there's all of a sudden a big chunk of data available for people to build businesses around. That 1/3 of hardware is still interesting, right? Because semiconductor businesses are highly profitable. The margins are pretty good. It's a good business to be in. But if you're missing out on 2/3 of the business, and you know that that's going to be 2/3 of 10 trillion, you should be scratching your head a little bit. So to answer your question, I remember a story years ago when I walked into the Admel boardroom and I suggested that we started giving our hardware away for free because there was a lot of similar statistics in the world that said, IoT is going to be big, but it's not necessarily in the hardware. I don't think that was much appreciated because we were, of course, very much, we were in the business of selling semiconductors and microcontrollers, and that's where that was paying all of our salaries, right? So they had a marketing proposing to give it away for free. It didn't make a lot of sense. But so let's be a little more realistic, right? So take a Sentient again, which isn't necessarily an embedded business, but you can add voice to anything you want, right? If you can add voice to anything you want, you're going to be sitting on a whole bunch of data. When I talked to the CEO a while ago, I said to him, there's multiple pillars of your business, one of them being the hardware side of the house. But the second one could be where you subsidize the hardware and you take a participation in the additional value that you could create for your customers. And he goes, that's exactly the way we're thinking about this. And sort of as a consequence, right, of course, I guess he liked me because he was trying to hire me. But I was very intrigued to be able to help that business because now I can go and do marketing for a business that isn't necessarily only staring at the value of the hardware, right? So that's super exciting. And for more traditional businesses, the names that you mentioned, right, ST and Microchip and those businesses, I think it's good to try and build a business model around some of the 2/3 of the value chain that is going to be created by the world, and not to only continue to focus on the hardware side of things. And it may be a little bit of a transition, and right, so my black and white approach of, hey, let's give everything away for free didn't make a lot of sense, right? But it makes at least people realize that there might be a ton of value over and beyond the hardware and the chip.
Yeah. No, I think so your vision back then is, I think, what they would call now is like hardware as a service, and so I think it's a fascinating concept because it also can be replicated up the value chain. So even if somebody builds a sensor, could say, okay, but if my semiconductor partner gives away the silicon for free, I might be wanting to give the sensor away for free. And then if there's a rev share on some kind of subscription that is application focused and not traditional telco focused that only gives you the connectivity, then there might be a model. But do you think, like in this industry where you have very powerful, very big distributors that control not only a lot of the supply chains of silicon, but they also control the models in which they distribute it? You need to have like a completely different paradigm. You need to have like a very disruptive challenger that just comes in and surprises the heck out of everybody, right? So do you think that when hardware as a service will become a truth, will become from inside out, or will somebody fly in and just disrupt everything?
Well, So let's park the role of the distributor for a second, right? Because there's something interesting happening there as well. I had a phone call last week from an MBA student here at Carnegie Mellon, because I lecture a little bit at Carnegie Mellon, and every now and then they reach out because they have a business plan or something like that. He was trying to build, I'm going to try to not give it away. So he was trying to build an embedded solution with some sensors for monitoring of individuals. That's as cryptic as I can go. And he wasn't necessarily interested in calling me because he wanted to have the best deal on the microcontroller. He was asking about the business and the data, right? So I guess my point is, young engineers that are entering the market have a little bit of a different thinking than the sort of old people like myself that have been in this business for a long time. And increasingly, you also see that software people are buying hardware, and in some cases, the software people are like, "Oh, it's just a piece of hardware kind of thing," and then the hardware people say, "Oh, it's more complicated than you think," right? So there's like this battle going on. But through the Arduino engagement, I saw that an increasing amount of software people are buying hardware, and those people aren't necessarily always geared towards optimizing, also from a business model point of view, on the hardware. Right, so there's a new generation of engineers, is my point, coming into the market that have a different way of thinking about value, and they're looking at the 100%, knowing that 30% is hardware, right? So that's one. Then distributors, here's the Sandler Arch version of distributors, right? They've been squeezed for a long time by the semiconductor players to a margin that was like not very sustainable anymore, because there's a question as to how much they do business creation versus business fulfillment, which has been an ongoing conversation for many, many years. You have seen that the Arrows of the world, the Avnets of the world, are trying to build very, very strong value propositions around IoT, right? Avnet, for example, did an acquisition in the IoT space by acquiring this cloud business, right? Where Avnet is building total solutions for businesses that want to take an IoT device to the world, right, and to the market, and where cloud and cloud services are an intrinsic part. Arduino, by the way, is doing the exact same thing, right? So Arduino not only has the hardware, but Arduino has a very, very, very thriving cloud business where in a very short period of time, more than 1 million people have signed on for them to be able to port the data into the cloud. So I think people are increasingly looking at the entirety of the value proposition, if I can say that, and which is good news, because now there's more stuff to work with, also from a marketing point of view, right? We were in a very transactional, linear business, which sometimes requires or has resulted in linear marketing. But if you can add more elements to the mix, you can also do more interesting.
I mean, another example is like when you saw that Microsoft Azure bought Express Logic for a significant amount, and AWS bought FreeRTOS. And it's interesting how these players are trying to at least explore each other's fields, right? Because these are like mammoths, like taking small steps.
Yeah, so there's something changing, and new thinkers that are willing to explore new business models, right? Like an Arduino or a Sentient, or maybe one of the big semiconductor players wants to have some advice in some of these areas. It could be very interesting to participate in the upside associated with the non-hardware version of the non-hardware portion of the value proposition.
Yeah, I think indeed, and I think what Avnet is trying to do is to provide these end-to-end services. And I think if somebody finds a model where the let's say commodity providers with the horizontal technology platforms can somehow monetize the higher value chain value, then potentially we would have something that could work. I mean, you're then also involved, and you were advising RISC-V. This is an extreme example of something that is very low level, very horizontal, but they enable something, probably a huge amount of efficiencies somewhere higher up in the value chain. So for instance, I think Western Digital has these chips in their hard disks, and now like they're selling like millions of these hard disks, and they're saving millions of license fees they would otherwise have to pay through ARM. So can you tell a bit about your vision on what do you see with the RISC-V and then the commercial organization is called Sci-5, or maybe you could tell a bit more about what you think about them.
Well, I think we should all follow them. I'm actually very proud that I was their original and initial CMO on a part-time basis. When Stefan, the investor from Sutter Hill, original CEO, came to me and says, hey, this is what we're building. I, of course, didn't necessarily understand the technology side of it, right? The speeds and feeds, but I understand the business model and understood the business model. And when he told me that he wanted to sort of sell cores and hardware eventually, or SoCs, as a service, right? The way people are selling software, I was very, very intrigued. And he was intrigued by my story of how we had built a big long tail business back at Atmel. So it was a match made in heaven kind of thing. They should be very proud of all the things that they've been able to accomplish, right? They built an incredible oil stain of people and a groundswell of a community that is talking around this particular topic. I think I knew from day one that it wasn't going to go away, but it's very clear that it isn't going to go away. They've successfully eaten into initially the low end of the ARM business, but probably going to be doing more. And it's very inspiring to see how they've been able to enable people anywhere in the world to go develop their own chip, right, or solution. There's a China component to that story, which is intriguing. I'm still on a few of the WeChat groups around RISC-V and Sci-5, and it's crazy to see the amount of energy that is on those groups. I can't read all of it, obviously, but I can hit the translate button, which I do on a regular basis, and you can see that the Chinese have thoroughly embraced the concept, because this, of course, is perfect for them, right? It's open source, it's easy to use, there's not a lot of boundaries, and they're taking it and running with it. As much as, to your point, right, some of the big companies in the US are doing with the likes of Western Digital, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Naveed and the team should be very proud of the ecosystem that they've been able to build around the company.
Yeah, super interesting, because I mean, it's been a field where like there's been such a dominant player active, and that they are trying to disruptive. And I didn't even know they're also going for like a software like a SoC as a service, which like sounds like a very, very cool idea. But yeah, it's definitely something I follow as well. So nearing the end, I think a lot of our audience is either systems integrators, product builders, people that want to explore the technology, and then eventually there's always you always in the end want to build something, and most of the time you want to scale that as well. And we've touched a bit on the subject of being focused on the technology and selling that, but also you need to market in a different way. And so what is the recurring advice that you get for, let's like, companies that are 1 or 2 years on the way, have found something that works, it makes sense, there's a product market fit, but like, what's next? Do you have some recurring patterns, or anything you can share there?
Well, yeah. Well, so the book talks about people-to-people marketing, right? So you see that there's an increasing amount of non-engineers buying hardware, and in some so if you were to sell hardware to me, I wouldn't necessarily be impressed with your speeds and feeds, because I'm just trying to solve a problem, and I'm just too dumb, right, so to speak, to be able to really understand the speeds and feeds. Now, I know that there's always going to be a different guy in the mix, right, in addition to me, who would be making a business decision. But take a people-to-people approach, which definitely means that you have to insert other messages into your marketing campaigns that go way over and beyond your speeds and feeds kind of communication. So that, yeah, and I think that's a recurring theme, because that sometimes engineers just can't help themselves, right? They sit in a room with other like-minded people, and what they come up with, and they're like, just for the record, they're all way smarter than I am, but they just come up with what they come up with, which is mostly very technical stuff, where if you take a step back and you think about what else you could be saying or who else you are going to be talking to, right, which is probably more important, it's good to craft messages for those particular audiences. It's not rocket science. We've done it on multiple occasions, and it was very successful.
Yeah, but I think so. Just because we're gonna wrap this up, but you started your story. You started your story that you were walking into a boardroom of all technical people that somehow ended, like their career ended because the boardroom was the ceiling, right? So, and then you came in with not being technical, and I think there we're like, I think a very important subject there's diversity, and it's something we value with our company also very much, that we have a lot of different kind of personalities in our company, but that really believe that indeed makes the difference. And you have a book. It's called "Cut the BS Marketing." I've read it. I really love it. So people can order it on Amazon, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what I'll do. So here's what I was thinking, right? With this whole COVID-19 thing and everybody stuck to their kitchen tables and offices. So what I'll do is I'll run a series of free sessions where people can talk to me in the next coming weeks through a platform called Chattalyze, where there's like 10-minute sessions. In the next few weeks, I'll put those out. So if people also, so if you can help, right? So I'll do it through my channels, through the
we'll put it on the link when we put this on YouTube. So we'll have this as a separate session. So that's super cool that you're offering that.
Then we can continue the conversation.
That's perfect. So then we're already 1 minute late, but super inspiring. Always very nice to talk to you. Thank you very, very much for your time. Stay safe, take care. And that's the end of the session. Thanks, everybody.
Congratulations on your continued success. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.